another tutorial video. Today's one is using Tonic Stamp Club number 27, which is called One in a Melon, to create a die cut background. So normally with one of these kind of backgrounds I would do all of the die cutting, put it onto a double-sided adhesive sheet and then add glitter over the top, so you didn't have to like stick down all the individual elements. But I know a lot of people don't like glitter or aren't that keen on having like sparkly shiny stuff on their cards, so I thought I'd show you just the regular way of creating a background with all of your die cuts, literally just adding the glue to the back of them and sticking them down. So I thought it would be another nice background tutorial to kind of show you, and I thought it'd be perfect for these dies. So as with all of the stamp clubs, you get your A5 stamp set, but then you also get, as well as coordinating dies that cut out, I haven't actually looked to see if you cut out every single one of these yet, but the majority of the dies, the stamps should have a die to go with them. But Tonic also put in extra dies in the die sets as well. So within this extra like selection of dies, you've also got the ability to create these apples and pears. So the outside die is designed to cut out the stamped image of the apples and pears, but you also have this interior piece of the die which gives you like if you've cut a pear or an apple in half, you get the cross section with the pips in the middle, so it gives you the ability to do that. And I thought it looked so lovely paper piecing the back in the opposite colours. So I've used those two together. I just taped both dies together and ran them all through together and cut out in total to do both cards, because I've got one already done and I'm going to show you how to do one. I cut 5 of each shape in each colour. So there's 5 dark purple pears and there's 5 light purple pears, and then there's 5 dark purple apples and 5 light purple apples. And on this card I've used the dark purple pear outline and the light purple apple outline, and then on the opposite card that I'm going to show you how to put together, we've used the reverse pieces. So we've made use of all of the interior and outside pieces of all the ones that we've cut, because when you're doing something like this and piecing other bits in, you might as well make the most of it and create a second card with all of those other pieces that you've got left over. And then also in the die set as extra dies, you've got a few sentiments. You've got the word hugs, you've got hello, and you've also got fruitiful, which I really loved. There aren't actually any sentiments that kind of go with the word fruitiful, but I kind of thought it sounds like beautiful, and you might say to someone, have a beautiful birthday. So I've put have a fruitiful birthday with a couple of little Dymo labels, so we'll do that on the finished one as well. But I just wanted to show this kind of really simple sort of idea of creating your die cut background. And I haven't used the word hugs, I've just used the word hug, so I just put the 3 letters down. And this die is actually really cool, I'll show you it. So you can actually cut both of them, sorry I was out of frame then, cut both of them together and you end up with little pieces that look like this. But then if you're cutting both of them together, I actually cut a bunch of these to use on another card that you'll see in my up close video. But you get all of those fall away letters as well, which could just be the part you're after, or you can use them on a different project. And when I'd put some of the apples and pears down, I felt like there was too big of a gap in some areas, and obviously an apple or a pear was too big to fit into that gap, so the word hug fitted absolutely perfectly, better than the word hugs with the S on the end. So I've just got a few little words hug hidden in the background because they're white on white, but I thought it just gives a really nice effect to the card. So first of all, when you're going to do some kind of background like this, have all of your pieces die cut. I've got everything die cut ready, so hopefully this won't be too long of a tutorial for you. And I've got 5 of each of them. So I quite like to go with an odd number of each of the elements. And I know 5 plus 5 equals 10, which is an even number, but we are going to be like trimming bits off and placing them in other areas where we feel like we need to add something in. So I feel like it doesn't particularly matter if you start with an odd or even number of something. So let's get on with placing our elements. Now on this card I did just go in randomly and just start by placing this pear down and then building around it, but if you really want to, you can definitely go in and take all of your die cuts, place them in different positions. Maybe you want an upside down pear, and then you want another full apple tilted in a different direction, or maybe that one differently, maybe another up the right way pear. Oops, they keep sticking to me. I think they've got a little bit of tape residue left on them. Or like arranging it like this to get a really good layout of all of your elements. So you can definitely do that if you want to. If that is your preferred way of creating a background, you can do this, take a photo of it, and then you know exactly where you need to stick all of your bits and pieces down. Or if you just like to place all of these down, you can just start sticking from here as well. And I think doing it this way, actually, you do get a better kind of result, because some of these areas I'd left too small of an area and didn't have like enough of a piece left, so I actually cut half an apple here and half a pear here, and then put other parts of them poking out in different areas. So you know, that's kind of like a different way of doing it. If you do something like this, but you find that there is a funny little gap that is too big to leave as white space, and you kind of need a colour to balance it, but you haven't got enough die cuts left, chop off like that bottom piece that's there, snip it in half and have it as like a half pear poking in or something. You can definitely do that as well. Also, looking from up above, those apples could also be pumpkins, so you could also do some kind of autumnal sort of project with those as pumpkins as well. So for this background, I will speed this up so you don't have to sit here and watch me stick all 10 die cuts down. But basically all we're doing is picking the die cut up from where we've kind of positioned it on our background, putting glue on the back, tapping off the excess, and then placing them into position. So I'll speed this bit up and come back when we're trying to fill in spaces with any of the bits that were overlapping. Okay, so I've got to this stage with all of those pieces stuck on there, but I feel like there is too big of a gap down here, and we have these excess pieces hanging over the edge, so we might as well make use of them. So I'm thinking the bottom of that pear would look really good poking in from the bottom there, just to fill in that gap. And then I think other than that, we did pretty good at spacing these ones out, much better than I did on the original card, because I didn't have them kind of planned out on the original one. So it does pay to plan them a little bit out where you want them to go. Then once we have got all of them stuck all over, we can trim off the rest of the excess from the back with our long bladed pair of scissors, which are the Tonic shears. Then we can go back in and just add adhesive to the back of all of these little half pieces to go as the innards inside the pears and the apples, and they give that beautiful little die cut element of the pip missing. If you really wanted to, you could have saved all of the coloured pips and placed them back in as well. Or if you were going to do the other idea that I was talking about, where you put a double-sided adhesive sheet down first and then have the sticky all around the edges, you could specifically target those pips with a different colour of glitter and then use a different colour of glitter in the background as well for a different look. So you can do all sorts of different things. So I'll speed this up so you don't have to sit and watch me put all of these back in. Okay, so now we've got to this stage, we've got those two pieces over here that we need to put over here where we moved our die cut across the card. So we can snip those off, again going from the back because it just makes it easier for snipping them off. And then put a little bit of glue on those little end pieces that are going to stick straight into this part of the background. And now when I do these kind of backgrounds, I like to work on a slightly larger piece of white card than what I would actually want for my card blank, or to go on top of my card blank. So we're going to flip that over, trim off the excess, make sure it's stuck down nicely so we get a good trim on the edge, and then we're actually going to trim this down slightly. It's only a tiny bit bigger than what I wanted it to be, but I tend to do it like this just so that you get a nice clean sort of edge. And if on one side you've hung the pattern over more, you can sort of counteract that by trimming a little bit extra off the other side, and then it looks like more of a complete pattern. So I usually trim my panels down to 3 3/4 inches. So I'm going to trim that excess piece off the other side to make those apples fall off the edge of the card a little bit more. And then top to bottom wise, I'm probably going to trim a little bit off of both. So a little bit off the top, and then I know where I line it up on my trimmer. So I line it up to there and trim a little bit off the bottom as well. Then we want to add our little word hug in the background. So I've got all of those little tiny die cut letters there. And then you can just stick these onto the background as well. Exactly the same way we were just doing it. They're just on a much smaller scale, but the tiny little letters will work on there perfectly. So again, I'll speed this little bit up so you don't have to watch me stick down these teeny little letters. Okay, now we've got everything on our background and all of our little words hug on there, and also I put one H over here and one G over here to make it look like the pattern is also, and another H over here actually, to make it look like the pattern is going off the edge of the card as well. It just gives a different kind of feel to it, and the fact that there's part missing words, I think it sort of adds that kind of overall background pattern idea to it. Then we want to add our sentiment. So for our sentiment, there is actually two dies. You get one die that cuts the word fruitiful, and then you get one die that gives you the outside bubble. You can definitely cut both of them together, so you would have the outside bubble with the word fruitiful that fits perfectly inside it, or you can have the bubble and stack up the fall away letters onto the bubble. Or for this one, I really liked the look of this just cut into a rectangle. So all I'm going to do is take my long bladed pair of scissors and trim this into a rectangle. I wasn't originally going to do this. I was originally going to stick all of the little letters onto the vellum bubble, which is why I've cut that out. But I decided that this, I think, would be more impactful. Also, it's quicker to do because I wanted to stack 3 of these together, and stacking 3 of each of those tiny little letters together I thought would take me quite some time. So I thought this would be like a cheats version of it. But what I'm going to do is something a little bit different. I'm taking this one here that I've trimmed into my rectangle, but then I'm going to sandwich my vellum between 2 of them. So I'm going to stack 3 of them up, but I'm going to sandwich the vellum between the 2 of them, because this is going to give me a stacked embellishment, but having the vellum stacked between a couple of the layers is going to raise the vellum off the backing of the card, so it's going to mute the background really nicely. And then I'm also going to have 2 layers on the front of it, so it gives it that depth, but the vellum mutes the background, but also having that depth is kind of replacing foam tape. Because I'm using vellum to go behind, I can't stick a piece of foam tape behind it because you'd be able to see it behind the vellum. So I'm putting the vellum in there to soften the background behind it, but I'm using stacked die cuts to act as like foam tape. So it gives more of like a little raised up kind of feel to it, even though it's just 3 die cuts on top of each other. And the easiest way to do this is to add glue to the front of this die cut. So little bits all over the front, and you do want it to be all over right up to the edges, and then we can tap off any of the excess, but try and go as close to the edges as you can. Then tap off all of that excess, then stick the vellum on top of this. Now, because we've cut this into a rectangle, we could have just used a rectangle of vellum, but I'd already cut the bubble, so I thought we might as well just use the bubble. So this is hanging over a tiny bit. So now we want to flip this over, trim off any excess of the bubble or just an excess of the vellum that you've used. You don't have to have die cut it into the bubble. So trim all those excess pieces off, and we've now got the vellum on our word, but it looks horrendous because we've stuck it on the top of it. So now you want to take your next die cut and put your glue on the back of it. going, you know, all around these edge pieces, because you know where you just added glue to the previous one, you want to add glue to the back of this one. So all the way around, tap off all of that excess, and then you can kind of like hold it up to the light. I think you can kind of see what I'm doing from above. So you hold it up to the light and place the other one on top, and then you can kind of squidge it around until you've got the perfect placement of the one on top of the other. So I think that's about right. I think maybe you can kind of see, if I hold it up, you can still see through that vellum, and you can see the light through it because we haven't put anything over the back of it. You can see how you can still see all the way through that. So press that down really firmly. Then before we stick the next one on, flip this over to the back so we can see that original rectangle that we cut, and then just cut up to that with your scissors. I found this way was the easiest way because I was trying to line it up like behind, and it was harder to line it up behind. So lining it up in front, sticking the vellum to the front of the first one rather than the back of the first one, makes it much easier. Then we can take the third one to stack it up even more. So now we currently have a vellum sandwich. There's a die cut, then the vellum, then another die cut, but we want to make it nice and three-dimensional like this one. So we're taking another one, putting glue on the back of this all over again because we want it to stick really nice and firmly, especially because there's so many like tiny little skinny bits between all of the letters in this one. Then tap off all of that excess again, and then you can either use the light, or now we have one on top of there, we can just line it up perfectly with the one that's already on there, and we'll get that brilliant alignment to make all of the letters really legible as well. And we can try not to get glue on the front of it too. Okay, I think that looks good. And once it's in position, flip it over and trim off the excess again. So we're getting back to that original rectangle shape that we cut it into. If you didn't like your original rectangle shape, you can amend it when you're cutting those extra layers as well, because the original one is the back one, so you can amend it a little bit if you want to. But that is our gorgeous three-dimensional little sentiment to go on here. And then I've got my Dymo label as well. So firstly, we'll stick that on. I quite like it at a quirky angle. I love the mix of font as well, the way the eyes have got the dots on them too. I think that's really nice. So again, all over the back of it, just to make sure it's going to stay nicely stuck to the card. Tap off any excess, and then put it at a wonky angle. You could just put fruitiful, you know, and just be beautiful as the sentiment, but the punny version of it. Or I've done my Dymo labelling, but you might have these kind of stamps in a stamp set, have a and birthday, or even have an, and then you can, you know, just amend it to do have a beautiful birthday or fruitiful birthday. So I've just done it with a Dymo because that is my preferred way of adding extra words to a card, because I just love the look of it. So I'm going to trim that down and then trim the other one down. And then to add these to the card, I'm just going to put a little bit of 3D foam on the back of it, just to raise them up a little bit and make them sort of stand out slightly. So let's go Hover and peel the backing off and put our foam tape on the back, and then trim off the excess. And then we can put that straight above there. And then birthday. Can peel off the backing of that and put the foam tape on, trim off the excess, and then put that underneath here. So we've got have a fruitiful birthday. And then as a final finishing touch, you could do whatever else you want to really, but I just felt like some of these white areas, instead of adding more tiny little die cuts to fill in those areas, I'm just going to take a Nuvo drop. So I've gone for the Simply White, which is just the normal glossy white drop, but one of the Dream drops would look fantastic, especially if it has more of like a purple mica in it. Maybe the Indigo Eclipse with like the slightly blue purple tone, nice as well. Or even the newest one, I think it's called Golden Shimmer, that's got like a little bit of gold in it too. That Dream drop would look fantastic, but any colour drop that you want to do. And I just found doing like a few little clusters of just like 3 little tiny white drops. Just kind of helps fill in some of those other areas. And if there's not room for 3, then do 2. If there's not room for 2, then do 1. Just as long as you kind of like repeat the same thing across the card. And if you have done some areas where you've just put the 1 drop, then repeat that in some other areas as well. So it's not just like one random drop in one position. Or if there's anywhere where you want to put 2 drops, then repeat that somewhere else as well. Make sure you repeat the 3 drops that you've already been adding to. It just sort of ties it all together really nicely. And maybe 2 over here, another 1 up there, another 2 over here perhaps. And vary the size of them as well. I always think that looks really nice. So there we go. We've got our finished card, which says, "Have a fruitiful birthday," and it's just a different take on creating a background with all of your little die cuts, and that is just 2 of the fruit elements from the die set, but you've also got all of the stamped elements that you can cut out. So you could have stamped like a whole sheet of the avocados or something, then you could die cut them all out and then stick them over a background like this as well. It doesn't have to just be die cut images, it can be your stamped images as well. But I do really love this inlaying kind of the ones back in. So I was also cutting together some of the hellos. I was cutting these ready. While I was cutting all of this other stuff, I thought I'd just cut some of these because I might want to use them on another card, but I cut them so the die was inside the bubble like I was doing with the hugs. So if you wanted to, you could do a similar effect with the words. So you could have the word bubbles but replace them with the opposite colour of whatever colours you're using on your project and put them back inside there. That one might be a really good one for using with the glitter because they're fiddlier kind of die cuts to stick down. But yeah, I think there's so many possibilities with how you can kind of take on this sort of technique. So really hope you enjoyed the tutorial video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget there's also an up close video to go along with this stamp club as well that will give you a full in-depth look at all of the dies that coordinate with the stamps from this month's stamp club, and I should have more samples to show you as well. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!